Hello students, welcome to Turito live classes. Myself A. Swagat. Today in this particular session, we are going to understand a new topic where I will be introducing the topic of circulation. So, we will begin with the components of the circulation. So, before we can begin here, I would like to show you the topics what we have completed in the previous session. So, let us have a look with that. So, in the previous session, we were trying to list out various steps involved in the urine formation. So, that is what we understood depending on the functioning and various segments of the nephrons, and then we looked at the functioning of the glomerular filtrate, okay, and then we understood the renal corpuscle, how exactly it is involved in glomerular filtrate. So, that is what we have seen, following which we looked at the selective reabsorption process in descending limb of loop of Henle and proximal convoluted tubule. So, they were involved in the selective reabsorption process, which is the second step in urine formation. After that, we understood about the threshold substances. So, do you know what are threshold substances? So, these threshold substances are actual excretory products which are usually not reabsorbed. Okay. Now, what you see here is they were of two types, high level threshold substances and low level threshold substances. Now, we also looked into the final step, that is hypertonic urine formation. So, the urine which is formed, which is having hypertonic concentration, that means higher level of solute concentration. Now, this urine, what it is formed, the way how it is expelled out of the urinary bladder accounts for the process of micturition. So, this is what we have done in the previous session. So, in today's session, now I have planned some of the objectives which we will be achieving in this particular session. Let us begin with the first one here. So, we will be recalling the components of the circulatory system first. That means, based on the previous understanding of the circulatory system, we will proceed our session, and then we will be recalling blood as a fluid connective tissue, and then we will look into the components of the fluid connective tissue starting with erythrocytes, leukocytes and platelets. What do you call platelets as? There is another name for platelets, like just like erythrocytes and leukocytes. Correct. So, some of you are putting in the chat box, it is thrombocytes. So, we understood about thrombocytes, we are going to follow about thrombocytes, and then we will also look into the formation and development of blood cells, right, how and where it happens, the development of blood cells, and then we will also look into the classification of the blood cells, especially the classification of the WBCs. So, we will try to classify the WBCs into granulocytes and agranulocytes. Once done, we will look into the different components present in the blood. There are primarily two components, first one is plasma, second one is blood cells. So, we will look into those components, what does this blood contains, okay, the chemical composition. After that, we will have a detailed understanding of types of blood cells, erythrocytes, leukocytes and thrombocytes. Erythrocytes are basically known as RBCs, leukocytes are known as WBCs and thrombocytes accounts for platelets. So, these are the objectives what we have planned for you today. Let us move forward and understand. So, first thing is circulatory system. So, the moment children, when you think of the circulatory system, what is the first thing that pops into the head? Correct. So, I got response here. So, you are dropping in here about heart and you said blood and blood vessels. This is what we get to see in the circulatory system. right. Okay, so can you just name these blood vessels, types of blood vessels? Okay, I see it already there in the chat box. Great. So, we see when we say types of blood vessels, they start with arteries and then veins, and there is another network of arteries and veins called as capillaries, right. That is what we see. So, we have blood, which is, these details what we have written here are actually nothing new to us, because excuse me children. So, I was saying these details mentioned here are certainly not new to us, because we get to see them for the first time, we get to learn them for the first time when we were in grade 7th. Okay. That is where we have a chapter called transportation in organisms. We get to see these details there. Now, here these are the main components of the circulatory system. Okay. That is what we know. When it comes to blood, we know blood as a fluid connective tissue. Hope you remember, where did you learn this? So, blood is a fluid connective tissue, alright, it is a fluid connective tissue. Now, where did you learn that thing, fluid connective tissue? Correct, absolutely, that is grade 9th, that is where we get to see the blood as the fluid connective tissue, and also we will have a detailed understanding of structure of heart also. In the upcoming sessions we will understand that, but by now we are just going to understand the briefly the circulatory system, what does it contain and all those details. So, we are going to begin with the blood. So, you see the circulatory system. Okay. So, when you see here, I would like to wipe out here and I will show you, it has blood vessels and heart. So, just now we saw that, right, following which this is how the fluid connective tissue would look like. It is in the artery, showing you the cells. Which cells are these you are looking at? Yes. So, certainly it is, there is no confusion here, you are looking at RBCs, red blood corpuscles. Okay. That is quite simple. Now, when you look at blood, circulates through the circulatory system. So, this is one of the main component of the circulatory system, which passes through the whole system, which actually involved in circulation. Okay. And then you see that we have circulatory system and its respective components we have seen. So, this is how the circulatory system would look like. Of course, you may not spot blood in here, but you will see, you can easily make out two main components of the circulatory system, that is, we have the heart, okay, and we have the blood vessels, following which inside the blood vessels we get to have the presence of blood, which is a fluid connective tissue. So, that is a fluid connective tissue, right, that is what we have. Now, you are to understand some more details about the circulation here. So, let us begin. So, this is what we have so far, we have gone through. When it comes to blood, that accounts for 6 to 8% of the body's weight, an average adult's body's weight. Okay. So, you see it says at 6 to 8%, it is very simple. Okay. For example, a person is weighing, let us say 100 kgs. Okay. Blood itself would account for around 6 to 8 kgs in that person. So, that is what it says. Okay. That is the percentage of the total body weight what we have. Now, that is completely an approximation and we get to see that percentage in an average adult human being. Okay. Now, normal adult blood volume would be approximately 5 liters. So, that is the approximation. Okay. It can be more than that, it can be less than that. Okay. Now, so blood is made up of cellular material in a fluid. So, that means it says that you have seen and you know much before I tell you that blood has so many cells within itself, okay, and you get to see that it is present in a fluid matrix known as plasma. So, we call blood as the fluid connective tissue, is not it? So, that fluid nature of the blood is because of the plasma. So, that is the one which is having that fluid nature, right. So, blood is a circulating fluid connective tissue. So, that is now I told you that it is a fluid connective tissue. We get to see this for the first time in tissues chapter of grade 9th, right. So, it is the same thing you are trying to get here. RBCs are erythrocytes, white blood cells are leukocytes, platelets are thrombocytes. They are all above suspended in a fluid matrix called plasma, right. So, it is the same thing we get to see here. So, remember these RBCs are erythrocytes, WBCs are leukocytes, platelets are thrombocytes. Okay. So, let us see what else we have for you. So, I think till here you are following it clearly, right. Okay. So, yeah, so cells are listed above are suspended in a liquid, a fluid known as plasma. Now, you see here the same thing, that is what we look, but if you wish to have a look at the structure, that would appear like this. So, it makes us clear the RBCs will have biconcave shaped structure. That means, either if you think of the apart from the this view what you are having, the lateral view, okay, that is like gives us a appearance of a disc. So, if you try to have a look, it would look like this. So, this is the approximate way how does the cells would look like. Either way you will see there is a biconcave shape. Bi means 2, 1, 2, okay, and concave. So, RBC is having biconcave shape, and when it comes to WBCs, you see they are spherical, okay, and they have projections on their surface, body surface. These RBCs are known as lymphocytes, okay, and we can also call them as leukocytes. We get to see different classification of WBCs. I will show you that. And when it comes to platelets, okay, they are known as thrombocytes. They have this kind of shape, and platelets, you get to see them. The platelets are the smallest among the blood cells. Okay, they are the smallest cells among the blood cells. So, can you tell me the functions of this platelets, WBCs or RBCs? Okay, that is right. Let us see. Okay. So, we get to see presence of many of you are saying about wastes in the blood, hormones are available in the blood, correct. Okay. So, when it comes to RBCs, you say it carries oxygen, okay, correct. It has hemoglobin. So, blood looks red because of a pigment called hemoglobin. Okay. Now, we have white blood cells, okay, that is leukocytes. So, what do they do? Right. So, some of you are dropping in saying that they basically fight against infections. They fight against infections, right, that is what we learn. And platelets, what do they do? Okay. Yeah, so we get to see platelets actually, usually they take care of coagulation process. What is it, coagulation here? Correct, that is coagulation refers to blood clotting. So, we get to see the thrombocytes are mainly involved in the blood clotting process. Okay. So, these are some of the basic understandings one must have before we proceed further. Okay. Now, you see what is the process which leads to the formation of blood cells? Come on, put up here, name the process which leads to the formation of blood cells or how the blood cells are formed. Okay, many of you are dropping the responses. Okay, I will show you. So, there are different processes we follow. Okay. One such important process which is involved in blood cell formation is hematopoiesis. This is the process which mainly helps in formation and maturing of the blood cells. Okay. So, formation and development of the blood cells. Okay. So, this is a process, fine. Can you tell me, children, which part of the body allows us to, or in which part of the body blood cells are formed? Where do you see the formation of blood cells in the body? Come on, think of it. Correct. So, some of you are putting in the responses saying that it is bone marrow. Okay, let us go a bit deep now. Can you tell me which type of bone marrow accounts for hematopoiesis or formation of blood? Okay. Let us see. So, bone marrow, okay, we have two types of bone marrow. One is red bone marrow, the other is yellow bone marrow. Okay. Now, this red bone marrow accounts for formation of the blood cells. Here you will find all the blood cells are formed. Okay. There are few exceptions, we will discuss that later. So, it is in the red bone marrow you will get to see the formation of the blood cells. Okay. Yellow bone marrow mainly accounts for the storing of nutrients, that too we will get to see lot of fats in this. Okay. Lot of fats in that. Okay. So, that is just a understanding. Okay. Let us move further. So, in adults the cellular elements are produced in the bone marrow. Okay. Some WBCs are produced by the lymphatic tissue and bone marrow. That means, I was telling about an exception. Your red bone marrow would involve in the formation of all the types of blood cells, but all alone red bone marrow cannot account for the formation of required number of WBCs. So, lymphatic tissue also accounts for the formation of WBCs, right. So, that is one thing. So, blood cells need certain nutrients to form properly, because they are actually the cells. So, they are forming inside our body, they also need various nutrients, right. So, all blood cells formed come from a hematopoietic stem cell. So, that is the root cause, that is the main cell which divides continuously and results in the formation of the blood cells. The cell name is hematopoietic stem cell. So, this is a word which you might have heard of. We get to see there are these days there are several stem cell banks are also available. What they do is baby much before it takes birth, you get to see that in the mother's womb. Okay. Now, there is a link between the mother and the baby with a tube like structure, we call that as placenta. Okay. Placenta, Okay. Now, when you see that placenta, you are to understand that it is in the placenta you will get to see some of the stem cells. Okay. So, stem cells are basically the ones they take out from the placenta and they store in order to understand in case if there are in future if the child accounts child has any kind of disorders or any problems in there. So, they will go back and search in the stem cell, they will try to do a small research to account if there is any change in the sequence of the genes or something, then they will try to understand how the what do you call disease is there. If at all any disease is there, using these stem cells they will try to cure. So, there is a possibility to do that. So, here hematopoietic stem cells are involved in the formation of the blood. So, these cells can become any type of blood cell. So, when we see there are hematopoietic stem cells, these hematopoietic stem cells can account for any type of blood cell. So, that is why it is a common cell which actually leads to the formation of RBCs, WBCs and platelets. So, all the types of blood cells are formed. Okay. Now, you see this is how the blood cells would look like. So, it shows us about the types of blood cells. So, let us have observation here clearly. So, you will understand. Okay, let us begin with this. First one is thrombocytes. Okay. So, here thrombocytes are given, commonly known as platelets. Then we have erythrocytes, biconcave shaped red color cells. They are red because they have a pigment called hemoglobin. So, that is one such pigment which is present in there, hemoglobin. Okay. When it comes to WBCs, there are several types of WBCs. So, you see basophil, neutrophil, eosinophil, monocyte and lymphocytes. Okay. So, you get to see these many types of WBCs. Now, that is why you have to understand something here. We get to see the formation of the WBCs in the red bone marrow of the bone, but part of them are also formed in the lymphatic system. Monocytes and lymphocytes are formed in the lymphatic system of the body. Now, I was mentioning about there is a classification, further classification of the white blood cells, right. It is further classified into two types. So, that is what you are seeing here, but I would like to show you this. Okay. So, here what I would like to tell you is basophils, neutrophils and eosinophils. If you observe these three cells, what is the common point you can fix out or pick out? Looking at basophils, neutrophils and eosinophils, there is a common feature among all these cells you will find. What is that common feature? Okay. So, what you can make out is correct, that is you see there are some structures inside these cells, is not it? That is what is the common feature you can make out when you look into these cells, right. So, there also you see there are some structures available inside these cells, that is one common feature. Okay. What else you can make out in common between basophils, neutrophils and eosinophils? Okay. Now, what you can see common thing is, if you observe, look at the nuclei of all of them. Look at this nuclei, how it is, as if it is divided into three parts, and that is how it appears. It appears like that, as if it is divided, but you see still there is a link available here, right. So, that is one more thing. One thing is some substances are available here inside, okay, small grain like things inside the cells. The other thing what you can find out is the shape of the nuclei, that is what you can see there. Okay. Now, if I have to show you what is that I am pointing, So, here the nucleus are having lobed structure. So, nucleus is having lobed nucleus. Okay. So, if you observe, this is a bilobed structure, 2 lobes. Here you have 3 lobed structure, trilobed structure. So, I am writing here trilobed nucleus. When it comes to this and this, you will see it is having bilobed structure. So, it is having a bilobed structure. So, that is 2 points, that are the 2 points what you can find out in common. Now, what I am trying to tell you is these 3 types of cells, basophils, neutrophils and eosinophils, okay, they are basically known as granulocytes. Granulocytes are the type, one of the type of the WBCs. Okay. Coming to the below ones, that is monocytes and lymphocytes, okay, they are actually known as agranulocytes. Okay. So, granulocytes and agranulocytes. So, this is a further classification of the WBCs we have. Got it? So, when you think of the blood cells, we have RBCs, WBCs and platelets. RBCs, you see them, they are having the biconcave shaped disc like appearance, okay, and they have hemoglobin within them, which makes them appear red in color. The most abundant blood cell in the body is RBC. That is why whenever blood cell is, blood is oozing out or bleeding occurs, you get to see red in color. That is the most abundant blood cell. Next, what you see is WBCs, you see here, they are of different types like you have seen. So, there are classification, the first one is granulocytes. The cytes means cell, cytes means cells, okay, it means cells. Okay. So, they have granule like structures inside them, so they are known as granulocytes. Coming to this one WBCs, you see they are agranulocytes, understood, agranulocytes. Now, these are the types of cells what we have. Okay. So, that is the classification of the WBCs, hope you understood that. So, let us move forward, okay. Let us have further understanding. So, here I would like to show you the further classification of the blood itself. It shows about the composition of the blood. So, if you observe carefully, blood is divided into 2 components primarily, that is plasma and the cells, 45%. 55% is plasma. It is because of plasma blood is having the fluid nature. It is because of the plasma blood is having the fluid nature. Okay. Now, we have to see that in the plasma we have 92% of water, 8% of dissolved substances. So, you might be confused looking at this. Plasma is accounting for the 55% of the blood. Within the plasma, 92% of the content is water, whereas the remaining 8% accounts for dissolved substances. So, you see here there are types of dissolved substances, that is various salts accounts for 3.5%. There are foods are also available, which includes your glucose, amino acids, fats, okay, followed by, you know about this story, hormones. We learnt about it in grade 8th, if you remember. That is where you get to see that understanding. Hormones are released through the blood and blood carries them. So, we have hormones in the blood, that is in the plasma, right. Next, what you see here is there are specific proteins are also available in the blood, that is here it is all about plasma, see plasma. So, in the plasma we have proteins, they are specialized proteins, they have fibrinogen and albumin. Okay. Now, fibrinogen is a protein present in the plasma, helps for blood clotting, okay. And albumin is again an important protein which is involved in maintaining osmotic pressure in the blood, okay. That is more important. And then we have waste products, carbon dioxide, urea, dead cells, and all of them would be there inside this waste products. Now, these are the different substances you will get to see them present in the plasma, okay. So, this is all done for the plasma, that accounts for 55% of the blood. Next is the blood cells, which accounts for 45%. As you all know, there are different types of blood cells, RBCs, WBCs and platelets. Now, WBCs are further divided like this. So, this is a different classification given here. That classification was based on the type of the features of the cells. This classification is based on the different functions performed by the WBCs. So, if you observe, there are one particular type of WBCs, they are known as phagocytes. That means, it is highly linked with an organism called amoeba. You know how do amoeba engulfs the food? Obviously, false feet, pseudopodia, right. Now, here also you will see pseudopodia found by these cells in order to engulf the dead or they are live foreign organisms which are causing harm to our body. So, they will be engulfing those organisms. Coming to the next one, lymphocytes are also the types of the WBCs, they are formed in the lymphatic system. They are of two types, that is B lymphocytes and T lymphocytes. So, T lymphocytes kill cancerous cells and infected cells, B lymphocytes produce antibodies, right. And finally, we are left out with platelets, and that helps in clotting, correct. So, this is the important composition, this is how the composition of the blood happens to be, okay. Hope you understood that. Fine, let us move forward. Now, I will discuss about the details of erythrocytes. So, erythrocytes are RBCs, and that is why when we have bleeding, we get to see blood appears to be red in color. The reason is this point. This point states that if you observe, it is the most abundant blood cell because for 1 microliter of blood, that is the volume, 1 microliter of blood will have 4 million to 6 million cells. Which cells? RBCs. 4 million to 6 million cells will be there in 1 microliter volume of the blood. That is why the blood when we are bleeding, we get to see blood is red in color. It is formed in the bone marrow. So, which bone marrow? Can you specify here which bone marrow we get to see the formation of RBCs? Correct. So, it is red bone marrow, RBCs and various other WBCs are formed. So, matured forms certainly they do not have nucleus. Why do you think they do not have nucleus? Okay, because they do not have nucleus, in order to accommodate more oxygen, because these RBCs which are matured, they do not have nucleus, they will be having a specific pigment, that is hemoglobin. hemoglobin should be more in the amount in that cell, so that it can hold more oxygen for transportation. That is the reason why they do not have nucleus. And you know the shape, that is biconcave discs. So, like I mentioned, it appears to be having a shape like this, biconcave. So, lifespan is about 120 days, and you know the spleen in the liver is the graveyard of the blood cells. So, hemoglobin, like I mentioned, it is iron protein present over there. So, hemoglobin carries oxygen from lungs to rest of the body, and carbon dioxide binds the RBC and taken into the exhaled. So, when this oxygen combines with the RBC, it undergoes a process. It is actually a physical combination, hemoglobin and RBC, sorry, hemoglobin and oxygen combined together physically. Okay? That is what is oxygenation. Okay? So, there is no chemical combination happens, there is only the physical combination that occurs. That is one thing about erythrocytes. Next is leukocytes. Leukocytes means WBCs. Okay? So, we are going to understand about WBCs, it is quite simple. So, white blood cells, white in color. Okay, so, leukocytes, WBCs, and these are the only blood cells which have the largest size among all. Okay? And at the same time largest size, and they are the lowest in number. So, that is how they are. The count you see, we will get to see 4,500 to 11,000 cells per microliter of the volume. So, that volume is 1 microliter. 1 microliter of blood will contain 4,500 to 11,000 cells, that is WBCs. So, again we get to see the formed in the bone marrow and also in the lymph glands. So, they are the primary cells for immune system, like I mentioned. Either they eat away the foreign substances or the disease causing organisms, okay, or they are also involved in the eating away or carrying away the infectious agents or cancerous cells. They kill the cancerous cells also. So, fights diseases, that is what I said, and foreign invaders. Okay. They have nucleus, you have seen them, bilobed, trilobed nucleus I told, right, that is how it is. So, with the DNA, and the shape depends on the types of the cell, that is the shape of the nucleus depends on the type of the cell. So, certain WBCs produce antibodies also. So, we saw this point in the previously discussed flow chart, okay, that is where we learned about it, got it. So, this is all about leukocytes, and their lifespan depends about 24 hours to several years. Can anyone tell me why it is like this, 24 hours to several years? Why it can't be like less than that? Think. Okay, it is a simple thing. Some of you are putting in the responses, I see. So, since you see that WBCs are involved in, they are fighting against the germs, against the disease causing microorganisms and all, right. Now, when you see they last for 24 hours to several years, that is what it is given. It means if we are getting infected with a pathogen, okay, that caused some disease to, let us say, fever. Okay. Now, we got a type of fever, okay, using medicines and sufficient food what we take, using that, that infection can be given away, fine. But in the body, the WBCs will carry the those antibodies which will be fighting against the antigens, okay, fighting against the antigens. So, they may present, that is antibodies produced by the WBCs will be present in the body for a longer time, just in case if the same antigen would be infecting the body. So, that depends. If it is just fever, it may last for, let us say, a few days, sometimes weeks. Okay. If there is some other infection which is a very serious infection, let us say these days we have pandemic, sometimes we get to see the virus is there inside the body for about 3 to 4 weeks. Okay. So, if that is the case, we get to see the antibodies are present in the blood and they will be fighting against this virus. Even after complete fighting of the virus, even after pushing out the virus from the body, we will have antibodies inside our body for quite a long time. So, the presence of these antibodies in the body, that depends on the type of infection a person gets. That is why the antibodies will stay for 24 hours to several years, that depends. Okay. So, that is why that is all we have for leukocytes. So, you see here the size in terms of diameters, the bigger size, right, 8 to 20 micrometers in diameter, and there are 5 types we have seen: neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils are basically known as, correct. So, they are known as granulocytes. Right, they are known as granulocytes, and lymphocytes and monocytes are basically known as, they are agranulocytes, right. So, we have different types here. So, this is what we did in the previous time, right. Now, let us see about thrombocytes, which are the last part of our understanding. We see thrombocytes are commonly called as platelets, okay. And we have, they are again formed in the bone marrow, okay, smallest among the blood cells. We have 3 types of blood cells, among them platelets or thrombocytes are the smallest ones, with a diameter of 1 to 4 micrometers. Okay. They have varied range of shapes, it can be spiky, oval, round, different shapes they have. Okay. Their lifespan is also limited, that is 8 to 12 days, whereas the WBCs, they may last for 24 hours to years, that depends, right, because they produce some kind of antibodies and they are the ones working for that, isn't it. So, that is why they last for different times. So, here we have involved in the clotting process, thrombocytes are mainly involved in the clotting process. That means, when we have this bleeding, if it has to stop, that is clot has to form, thrombocytes have to take care of the process. Okay. So, they seal wounds and prevent blood loss, just now we saw that. Following that, they help repair the damaged vessels. If the vessels are damaged, bleeding is happening from the vessels, we will lose blood pressure, first thing, we will lose blood as such. Along with that, whatever substances are there in the blood, we will be losing them. So, to avoid that loss, we need a system in the body which can stop bleeding. So, that is done by thrombocytes. Okay. So, you see 1,50,000 to 4,00,000 cells per microliter of the blood. So, that is the density what we have here, in the sense 1,50,000 cells to 4,00,000 cells will be present in 1 microliter of the blood. So, platelets stain bluish with reddish or purple granules. If you wish to observe them, they are basically having a stain which is gives us an appearance of bluish. So, we can have that look like that, and they look like this. So, platelets have the appearance like this, and they are commonly platelets, and their name is thrombocytes. Okay. So, hope you understood this session. So, let us recollect the topics what we have done so far. So, first one is we recalled the components of the circulatory system: heart, blood vessels and blood. Following which, we understood that blood is a fluid connective tissue, which is having, it is a tissue which is mainly the process involved in the connection. So, it is a fluid connective tissue, and components of the fluid connective tissue are erythrocytes, leukocytes and platelets or thrombocytes. So, we saw the formation and development of the blood cells, that is hematopoiesis is the process which leads to the formation of the blood. And then we classified the blood cells, that is we classified the WBCs into two types, granulocytes and agranulocytes. So, they were of three types and agranulocytes were of two types. And then we understood the components of the plasma and blood cells in detail. So, blood itself is having mainly two components, that is plasma and blood cells. So, we looked at the composition, and finally, we have gone through the details of erythrocytes, leukocytes and thrombocytes. So, that is all for today. So, hope you understood the session very well. So, let us meet in the upcoming session and discuss more and more topics. Thank you.